Hello, everyone. Wednesday-ish, 11 a.m. Here we go. Questions, please.
Hi, everyone. Today's question is from a fellow coach who checked out the templates, and he has the question if there is kind of like an order in which to do the muscle jobs. And with this being said, kind of like maybe you could do like a short intro for anyone listening who has never heard the term or been spoken about muscle jobs. What do we mean when we say muscle jobs? And then what is the correct order, or is there even an order to consider?
Mhm. Okay, so first things first. The most important thing is you have to train and do the templates. So I see the muscle chops. I think it's a valid information, and I think it's a good additional information. But at the end of the day, if you only have 2 or 3 hours a week, it doesn't really matter. Just do the templates because the perfect mix of the muscle chops is already in there. Okay, so that's the first one. It's like thinking about painting the facade when you have not built the house yet. So build your house first and then think about whether the facade is going to be blue, yellow, or green. That's kind of the muscle chops, right? Okay, so let's make a practical example. Let's take the glutes, for example, the glute max. The three muscle chops. This is not something entirely new. On the contrary, this is like everybody knows isometric, eccentric, and concentric. So why do I call it muscle chops? Because I think we have to look at it differently. This is not something that's exercise based, but it's more like, okay, every single big muscle in your body should be capable of doing all three jobs. Let's take the glutes and let's take whatever. Let's go for isometric first. Isometric means there's no change in muscle length. Think about doing a Semper carry, your glutes are going to be squeezed and basically squeezed throughout the whole carry. So that means there's not much change in muscle length. Eccentric, for example, would be when the muscle is lengthening. I'm sorry, when the muscle is shortening. That means going, for example, going back down in a Semper box squat, Semper squat, whatever. So you're putting the brakes on, you're decelerating, you're kind of slowing the weight down in a Semper box squat on the way down. Producing means the muscle's going to get longer. So think about picking up whatever, doing a Semper clean, picking something off the floor. So that means once your hips are starting to hinge, the muscle is actually getting longer. So I think it more in the sense of teaching each big muscle all three jobs equally, right? So there's not a you have to do more of this or more of this per se. You will realize when you have a lack of one of them, right? Super simple example. Everybody either likes squatting or deadlifting more, right? So when I ask you what do you favor, squatting or deadlifting?
Deadlift.
Okay, deadlifting. So chances are you have some sort of deficit in squatting, which means the glutes going back. That means the muscle lengthening. I always mix it up. That means the muscle
Shortening.
shortening. I'm sorry. Yeah, absorbing the tension. So chances are this is what we have to work on more for you specifically, right? And vice versa. So for people who like squatting more, usually shorter femurs, shorter torsos that are more predispositioned for squatting in terms of bone structure or hip structure, they usually have a harder time producing tension with the glutes. So I see it more as a playing tool towards, okay, um, which exercise do you like doing, which do you not? So I can encourage you to work on stuff that you don't like, but more in a more playful way, understanding okay, you have to balance out all three jobs at the same time and always. Um, I think it's worth mentioning what balancing out actually means, right? So when we think of balancing three jobs, that means 33.3% for each, right? And that is mathematically correct, but from a training perspective, it couldn't be further from the truth. Here's why. Because chances are you've done 80, 90% until your whatever, until your first or in your first 20 years of training, 80, 90% more towards squatting or more towards deadlifting. So everybody's super imbalanced going into this. That means to balance this out, you have to do 80, 90% of the other stuff that you have not done yet, right? Um, so this is important from a programming perspective because it's not about, okay, I have 50% of absorbing and 50% of producing, meaning 50% squatting, 50% deadlifting. No, this is not how this works. You have to do 80, 90% in your case of squatting, practicing, learning to absorb tension, and also doing 10% of what you already been doing for the last, whatever, 20 years. So that's actually what's balancing out because you're not starting from an equal scale, so to speak. Does that make sense? Um, so the order of things is not that important. It's more like looking at your numbers, looking at the exercise that you're doing, looking at what you suck at, to put it frankly. And that's what we're going to focus on, like heavily. 80, 90% for me, for my example, is I'm a natural hinger. That means I know what to do with my hips when I have to pick up weight, whatever, but I have a hard time doing the opposite, like bringing weight down, for example, in a squat, absorbing the tension. So guess what? 80, 90% of what I'm doing is focused on the latter, and 20% is focused more on the former. So the order of things is not that important. It's more of, okay, we have to balance it out, but prioritize it and also realize, okay, this is what we have to work on heavily.
Would you say from a practical standpoint, though, that someone who's just starting off with the templates, that just like for the first, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 months to just do the templates and don't even worry about like percentages, where you're starting from and how to get like balanced, quote unquote, or at which point would you say it's worth kind of like reconsidering your programming and being like, okay, now let's look at where my strengths are and where my deficits are, and to then kind of like shift the proportions?
I think it's more of a question of how much time are you willing to invest on a weekly basis, rather than how much have you already trained, or how long are you going to do the templates for. So that means if you're willing to invest 2 to 3 hours a week in your training, that's totally fine. That's great. That's awesome. But that means you're doing 2 to 3 templates a week. You will never ever have to worry about anything that I've said so far in this call, right? Because it's just the icing on the cake. You should focus on 2 to 3 hours a week. Okay, get better at the chains and rope pull, get better at the Sempex box squat, get better at whatever else exercises is in the template in there, and don't worry about the other stuff. Like I see my job in, okay, training is pretty complex, but we don't have to make it super complicated for people who are not willing to invest more time. And I think that's totally a fair point. Um, I think everybody should invest 2 to 3 hours a week in a training, but I don't think they have to invest more than that. If you do so, that means 3, 4, 5, 10 hours a week. Okay, then we can start like broadening the topics and talking about in depth about it. Or if you're coaching other people, yes, then it makes sense to kind of tap into that. But for most people, it's really not necessary. It's interesting. It's fun to talk about it. I think it's a good concept to step away from those Excel sheets and check boxes into more like playful stuff. And because I still think we humans learn through playing and not through getting taught and whatever, read books. I think we have to try stuff, test stuff, and that's what the templates are for. But again, you don't have to worry about it if you're training 2 to 3 hours a week at all. Zero. It's all in the templates. Like every single big muscle is going to get challenged in all three jobs, and you don't have to worry about it.
Okay. Um, the initial question of the coach, he also asked if there is a difference between like hips and shoulders when it comes to the muscle jobs.
Um, no, because this is based on muscles and not on joints or joint structures or bone structures. So in the first book, I'll break it down like the most important muscle, like by far in your upper body, in your shoulders, are the lats. The most important one for your trunk is the obliques, and the most important one for your lower body slash hips is your glute max. So those three, if you cover those three, you're gonna be good. I have like preferences in terms of exercises, how I personally like to practice the different muscle jobs, and those are in the templates. But there's hundreds. I don't care about the exercises. I like the concept behind it, and you can practice it with whatever exercise you want. Doesn't really matter.
Did you actually, when writing the book, did you start with the whole hip part and the hip templates first before you did the others, or was it kind of like starting here and there and kind of like growing all at the same time?
Um, no, um, I started with the hip for sure. I mean, I have a pretty embarrassing confession to make because I think the hip's the most important one. That's why I started with it, and I think it's fairly easy to fix for normal people.
Mhm.
It's not that complex, and it's way easier than the shoulders. Way easier, and I think the it just has the best bang for your buck. That's
Why
that's
is it?
reality.
Mhm. But why is
So
it
what?
easier? Why is it easier to fix than the other parts?
Because there's one hip position that you need to learn, which is the neutral hips.
Hmm.
There's one muscle you need to teach three jobs, and that's about it. If you have that concept dialed in, and every normal person, we see that in a gym, gets the basic concept roughly in between 3 to 6 months, depending on their experience in training, and that's really really fast because um, once you understand the concept of the neutral pelvis with the glute max, you will cover your lower back, your hips, your knees, and your ankles. And that's a lot.
Hmm.
And let's be honest, we just need our hips nowadays way more than the shoulders. So that's why I started with the hips. And I think if I could only do one thing for the rest of my life, it would be absolutely fixing hips in this world. Absolutely. Um, the second thing was actually the spine and the trunk because that's kind of the next thing on the hips um upwards and then the last thing was shoulder because the shoulders are fairly complicated but a little bit more complex because they can move around a lot. There's more positions, there's more stuff you need to learn, and I think it's in one B priority and not a one A priority. And to finish the really embarrassing story, on the last workshop last year, I think it was in August, I actually did the shoulders on Saturday night, like at my house, and finished that chapter, and then I taught it on Sunday. It's not that I never thought about the shoulders, of course, but I never had it actually put it down on paper. So shoulder were definitely the last.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to the call? Because that's that's the only question we have for today.
Yes, I've lost my phone. Um, I think the most important thing is, as always, I want to make training less complicated, more playful. I want to have you invest a little bit more time, but less worrying about stuff that you also have to do. Like, no, no, no. Let's make it less complicated. 2 to 3 hours a week. 2 hours is fine, to be honest. Just do two templates a week: one shoulder, one hip, one shoulder, one trunk, one hip. Doesn't really matter. Just do two templates a week, and you're gonna be good. I think, and I've put a lot of time in there to actually break it down to those really basics. And I think that's more than enough for normal people. Of course, if you want to go further down the rabbit holes, I got a lot of bunch up my wizard sleeve to talk about. But I think, and I already said in the beginning, don't worry about stuff that you have to fix at some point in your training career. Like focus on your hips, focus on your neutral pelvis, focus on your glutes, focus on the lats, focus on your obliques, and that's about it, right? Don't worry too much about muscle jobs. Don't worry too much about whatever the anchors, hands or feet, pressure points, or muscle chains. That's great to know, but there's enough time further down the line. Um, so build your house first, build the base first, and then paint the facade.
That's good life advice in general.
Yes, that's a very practical advice. All right, guys, good question. Thank you. Can I say his name, Stefan,
Yeah.
for sending in the question. Keep keep bringing them on. ask questions, and I hope to put it into perspective and give you guys the fastest practical solution to start actually solving problems and stop just doing pure exercising out there. Hang in there, guys, and we'll talk to each other next week.